Okay, hi, my name is Max Davis. I'm a student at UMass, and today we're going to be doing a podcast on social media and mental health and the effects of social media on the mental health of teens and even my peers, so college age students, just kind of how social media affects the way that we think, um, sort of the things that we care about and things that we prioritize in our life. If you guys want to give a little bit
So I'm Lindsay. I'm also a freshman at UMass, and I'm excited to be talking with Max today. And then we also have his sisters here.
Hi, I'm Francesca. I'm a fourth year at Northeastern.
Awesome. I guess I'll just speak a little bit like about myself. Um, so I guess like my social media journey, um, I think that the sort of why I wanted to write about this topic and talk about this topic is I think that it's sort of something that a lot of kids that my age experience. I think we all sort of deal with some level of like social media anxiety and like um, I think it's just sort of molded the way that we think about things. And I feel like it's something that we don't really talk about. Like many of us use these social media platforms. And I think there are some that sort of like bring this out more than others. I think like Instagram being a main one just because it's like so picture based.
Yeah.
So you definitely, I think it makes you a lot more conscious about like the way that you appear online, like physically. But I just think that it's something that we don't really talk about much, even though I know that many of us experience it, and I know that I've like sort of dealt with it. And it's sort of like changed the way that I live and think, and like I think the things that I sort of prioritize, like I know that like having Snapchat or having Instagram, like if I were to post something on Instagram, which is rare, but like if I were and when I have posted something, it's like I would check like every 5 minutes just to see like who liked my photo or like how many likes are on my photo. And it's like the same with Snapchat.
Yeah.
You know, I can't speak for like many other social media platforms because I don't really use like Twitter or TikTok. Um, but I feel like TikTok does sort of have a similar effect because it also like Instagram is very like visual based. So I think it does sort of like make you think a lot more about the way that you look and the way that you appear online. And it's, I think it just like causes like, it's just like, I think all these platforms are just the root of like so much anxiety that is like unnecessary, I think, to a degree, because it's not like, I don't know. I also just think that it's like sort of made us more judgmental and like,
Much more judgmental, yeah.
and I think that we just like are a lot quicker to judge other people just based on like what they post and the sort of things that they put on their social media
I think
accounts.
that's definitely true. I don't have Instagram anymore. I think it will be relevant to talk about why, but I think when I had Instagram, like in high school, I definitely judged people based on what they posted on their Instagram, what their Instagram looked like, how many followers they had, how many followers they didn't have, how many likes they got on it, like all of those kinds of things. And that's just like not really representative of who anyone is. So I think it's probably a silly way to perceive people, but
another way I really think that it sort of impacts the way that we live is like, I think that it really changes the way that we experience things. Like, I think that a lot of the time too, like we do and like experience things for the purpose of like letting everybody else know that we're experiencing those things. And I actually included, let me see if I can pull it up. I included a Drake quote in one of my essays because I thought that it sort of like it summed it up really well. So he says, so he says here, I always hear people complain about the place that they live, that all the people here fake and they got nothing to give because they've been staring at somebody else's version of shit that makes another city seem more exciting than it is. I know a girl whose one goal was to visit Rome, and then she finally got to Rome, and all she did was post pictures for people at home because all that mattered was impressing everybody she's known. And I think that like that does sort of like ring true to a degree because I think that a lot of the times, you know, and I noticed it within myself too, that like when I would travel, for example, like that would be something that I would think about. Like, okay, well, like I went here, like I feel like I have to post something because I went here, you know, like what am I gonna post? Like, am I gonna be in the pictures or is it just gonna be pictures of like where I was? And I feel like it's just like, it's another thing that really takes away from like the experience of life because you just like, you miss out on like why you're supposed to be there and like, you know, like why people do travel and see, you know, like experience different things and different cultures and whatnot. And
I think it takes us out of the present, and I think it makes us kind of more surface level than we really are, and just like we're trying to prove something. Like I remember when you were saying like when you got it, like it was mostly Instagram that's affected us, I feel like, because that's what I first downloaded as a social media platform, but that was in like 5th grade, and I still remember like how my mindset kind of switched when I started caring about likes. And it was so weird because it's like you have to, your profile is your identity, and when you're that young, you don't even know who you are, and you don't even know what your identity is, and then somehow you have to like prove it to others and show what you're doing, and it's like you're literally just living life and you're doing school, but then you have to like seem like your life is cool, and it's just like it's a fear of missing out, it's a fear of not being as cool as another person, or like if your best friend is getting way more likes than you, you're like, oh, like is she cooler than me? You know what I mean? It's just like that's something that I actually thought, and something that I was worried about was just like how I was perceived on Instagram when that wasn't even who I was, which is kind of what she was referring to. But and I also like grew up with anxiety, so I didn't understand like how my anxiety played a role in social media and how social media affected my anxiety levels. But I would notice like every time I posted, I would also be checking it and seeing what everyone had to say, and like I never got that many likes because I didn't know that many people. Like I had my core friend groups and I was like a private account, but then sometimes I would be like, oh, this is not good enough. Like my other friends have so many more likes than me, and it's just like constant comparison, especially just like on an image-based level of like how you're supposed to look, how you're like what you're supposed to be doing, how you're supposed to be living. Especially even like now, I don't even care that much about likes, and I could turn my likes off and it wouldn't matter, but there's still a part of me that's like really deep inside from just like middle school and that first instances of how we grew up on it, that still compares myself to like what other people are doing, even though I know that so many times it's just that's not what their life is. It's just like the highlights of their life. So, and I always hear like in LA, influencers are all depressed and like their lives aren't that interesting, but I just think it's funny and like it's really sad at the same time because I feel like we weren't intended to live this way, and I feel like we lost a part of how we could be living. And I kind of like think about that a lot, and just like the idea of posting an Instagram picture, if you really step back and think about it, is so weird. Like, why? You're posting a picture of yourself or of whatever it is, but why? Like, it's such a weird idea. And it kind of like disgusts me, but it's just like the way we live, and it's so weird how we don't talk about it. It's just the way we live.
It just like, I understand what it stems from and sort of like why social media as a concept like exists.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand the idea of sort of like sharing your life with people who, you know, like want to know what's going on with your life, but it's just like not that. You know, like half the people who follow you don't care.
Yeah.
But like to you, like you see like all your, like you want like, because like when you post something too, especially on like, because it's so crazy like what it's become in terms of like now that you have like people have like private Instagrams because like of the idea that you don't feel comfortable sharing your life with everybody who follows you, yet like that's kind of like the whole point of what social media is supposed to be. And the idea that like all the people who follow you, like there's a good portion of those people who barely know you and like don't care.
Yeah.
But yet you like consider their opinion so much before you even like go to post a picture. Do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, I think you guys brought up a lot of good points. I also was something I was thinking about is like I don't think social media necessarily brings up like things that didn't already exist. Like inadequacy is just like natural, and like to compare yourself is like something that already happens for a lot of people, especially I think if you are a more anxious person. Like I think it's natural to compare yourself to others or not feel cool or not feel popular or whatever it is, but I think it is like you can't really help that it's going to exacerbate those feelings. Like,
it really definitely brings them out.
Yeah, it's like it's even if it doesn't necessarily create new anxieties for you, it's definitely going to make it worse, I think. Yeah, and one thing I was thinking about earlier, when you guys were sort of talking about traveling and how like there's such a pressure to prove, you know, like that you're having such a good time and like this is where I was and this is how good I looked and like this is what I saw and look how cool my life is and blah blah blah. I think on the other side of that, there's also like my experience with Instagram specifically was like when I first came to college, I found it really isolating and like I didn't really have like the social life that I wanted to have right away, and I had a really hard time watching a lot of my friends from home you know, posting and like they were at schools that were maybe more exciting socially and were having a really good time, and like so when you see those posts too, like I think you think a lot of us think about what we post and how that's being perceived, but you also like there's a bit where seeing what other people post can really affect you, and like that sort of comparison, it's not just like necessarily I didn't get as many likes as this person, it's more like looking at their life and kind of thinking that's the experience when they're having, when we already said like we think that our Instagrams are identity, but it's really not, right? Like it's not necessarily indicative of who you are or the experience that you had, but we think it is. So even if maybe someone's having that same experience in college, if they're posting themselves like having a good time all the time, there's people sitting at home seeing that being like, well shit, like I'm having a terrible time.
I think Drake actually sums that up perfectly in the quote, because he said like, I always hear people complain about the place that they live, that all the people here fake and they got nothing to give because they've been staring at somebody else's version of shit that makes another city seem more exciting than it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I feel like that just like sums it up so well. Like we're just like, because think about it, it's not only just like your friends too, like as you were saying, you know, you would see your friends like post things about like what they were doing at their school, and it sort of made like where they were going and like where they, you know, their school and their social life seem more exciting. but it's also like the people that we idolize. Like social media has sort of like bred us to like idolize people to a different degree, because I think in the past with like celebrities and stuff, I think it's because we saw so little about their lives and like the things that they were doing, that it was like the mystery that made us idolize them, because they were these big amazing people, but we didn't really know much about them necessarily, or we didn't, know what they did daily. But now, like in the age of social media, it's like we know what all of these people are doing, and they're posting like where they're going, who they're with all the time, and we're like, oh my god, like, those are like my two favorite artists and they're hanging out together, and you're just like, it's like that constant, like, you're viewing the people that you love and like look up to or idolize, and they're doing like all these things that you may be jealous of. And I think that also like kind of brings it out, that level of like jealousy and sort of like looking at what other people are doing and it seeming more exciting than your own life, because that's what like a lot of social media is now. I mean, I feel like a good chunk of the people that we follow, or at least for me, is like my friends and like people I know, and then like celebrities or like like famous people or rich people, whatever it may be, that I like or I look up to, or I whatever it is. So I think like, a lot of your feed ultimately becomes like either people or people you look up to, and it's like the things that they're doing and like the things that they're seeing.
And I think like it also, like, that jealousy already might exist. Like, you might already have those feelings of like, like, I'm jealous of their wealth or their status or their celebrity or whatever. But I think the feelings of inadequacy are really what are, like, kind of brought out the most. Like, for me, it's like, maybe I was already jealous of that person, but it's just like, oh, well, I'm not good enough. I'm not cool enough. So, like, why am I even posting,
Yeah, I think there's also it's such a like, we know it's negative for us and we see all of these negative things that come from it, but somehow we still stay on it. And I give you so much props for deleting it, because that's like a huge shift, because you're accepting that you're not gonna be viewing others on Instagram anymore, and like you may be missing out on what someone posts or what other people are doing. And I think that with that, it is addictive, because we feel when we get that validation, we get those likes, and we feel like when our Instagram is, I guess, meeting up to these standards that we set ourselves, it's kind of like a self-esteem boost also. And it's like a sense of, right, like, and it's a sense of belonging, like, oh, I belong in this social circle because and like, people now meet each other socially in real life through online, and that's how I met my literal roommate that I'm friends with currently, is because through social media and how we saw each other online. But it's just like the structure of, I guess, like the platform, and it's addictive because you're getting that boost of validation, and then when you're not getting that boost and you're not like receiving that, you feel kind of like, oh, should I be posting now? I haven't posted in so long, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think also, like, for me, it was, I just kind of had to weigh, like, okay, yes, I'm getting validation and this high of like, I have a good Instagram or whatever, and like, I get likes or whatever that, feeling is, to like, for me, the way more intense, like, constantly scrutinizing not only my own account, but then the feelings of just like, jealousy of other people's experiences and the pain that comes with that, like, that was so much more intense for me, and that was so much more constant, because it was always, on my social media accounts, rather than like the sort of more infrequent high you would get from and even like the attachment to that is unhealthy, I feel like. So I think it was just at some point it was just easier for me to not have any of it. But I also think, Max, you brought up earlier, like, I think Instagram is an interesting case because for that, like, you can't really be on Instagram without, like, providing some level of content. Like, you get people who are on Instagram are, like, posting on their Instagram rather than just, like, viewing it, I think, a lot of the time. And for me, I find it easier to be on things like TikTok or Twitter because I don't really produce any content or necessarily follow my friends. Like, I more of the time follow like content creators, and so that then it's more entertainment based for me than it is about like the social aspect, and then I find it a lot easier to be on those platforms rather than maybe Instagram or Snapchat or something that's so social.
Yeah, I would agree with that it definitely I guess it's sort of like I mean, at least for me, I wouldn't say it's like as anxiety inducing as like more of the social media platforms, that it's like strictly to sort of like interact with other people and like see what other people are doing. One thing I kind of wanted to talk about, which I think is sort of crazy to me, I'm not sure if you guys know any others, but just like some of the terms that our generation like have like come up with when it comes to social media and like things that like genuinely like people genuinely care about. And it's like this is probably sort of just like stemmed from conversations that I've had with like friends in the past, but just like for example, like with Instagram, like a term that I've heard before is like the ratio that you have of like how many followers to how many people you're following. And I just think that like, I don't know if you guys can think of any other ones that like we kind of use, but I just think it's like it's like the craziest thing that there's like now sort of terminology to like describe how deeply we think about like the things that, you know, in social media that really impact us. Cause like I can recall conversations that I've had with friends where like they've brought that up and just been like, oh, like mine's not very good, you know, like, or like it's just, or like, have you seen like her ratio? Like she's got like 5,000 followers, but she only follows like 800 people or whatever. Like it's just like how we care about these things when they just like they really don't matter. But it's just like the terminology that we've created as a result of like just these things.
Well, I think also like more than the terminology, which is, I agree, sort of ridiculous. I think it's like the things that we do to like achieve what the terminology means. Like I would spend so much time like, I don't know, like maybe following people that I didn't necessarily care about to like sort of get followers back, or like unfollowing people all the time and like going through my who wants to spend their time that way? That's such a waste of time. But I think it becomes so important because it's now just like so connected to what our social life looks like. And
and I think even like there became like the Instagram reels, and like or like below your profile or something you can add past Instagram stories, and like if you didn't have the Instagram stories still showing on like the Instagram reels, that your Instagram wasn't like complete without it. And it's like I didn't even really post any Instagram stories because like I was just like, we have Snapchat stories, like why do I need to do Instagram too? But it's just like this expectation that's set that's really ridiculous.
It's like they're constantly moving the mark. Like it's never good enough. There's a new sort of standard of what's good that you have to achieve, and it's kind of impossible to keep up with.
Exactly. And at that point I was just like, all right, like I'll just accept that I won't have the finished,
Yeah.
complete Instagram profile without the Instagram reels. Like, okay.
But that's, I think, part of what's so damaging is like you either accept it and you're like, then you're constantly thinking, well, you know what, it's not the best Instagram or it's not the best Snapchat, but like this, and then you kind of feel that like underlying guilt or shame around it.
Yeah.
Or you're constantly competing and constantly trying to have like a better account. And so it's like either way, it's consuming you.
Right, exactly.
So what do you guys think? I'm just curious to hear like your guys' perspective on this, or maybe your guys' experience with this, because I don't really have any experience with it. But just sort of like the whole idea of like how heavily like some people will like edit their photos, or like how much time and effort and thought people put into sort of editing their photos to achieve like a particular sort of look. I don't really like, I feel like it's mostly sort of for Instagram, and I don't really post on Instagram much, and when I have, like there's like a few pictures of me, so like I haven't, I've maybe thrown like a filter or something on a photo, but even that, like that is like a form of editing your photo, and it like, obviously you have some goal in mind when doing that, like you want to like sort of make you or your friends or whatever look a certain way, and I'm just kind of curious like what your guys' thoughts are on like sort of how that impacts the way that we think about ourselves and how we like judge other people based on the way that they edit their photos.
I honestly never really care, like, or even catch or notice when people heavily edit their photos at all, because people do, like my friends, some of them are really nitpicky and like zoom in on other girls' photos, which I think is really disgusting. And like one time, my friend showed me like, oh, like it was just her body, and she was like, that has to be fake. And she was just zooming in, and I was like, but why do you care so much? You know, like I would ask her that and be like, I would never zoom in on that. Like the fact that you're even like asking me is like crazy. Like, and I wouldn't do that. The most I do is like, I guess I had acne, and really bad acne in high school, so I would like patch it up or like smooth out my skin, and that's the most I would do. But I honestly wouldn't even post pictures at that time when I had acne, because I was just so insecure about it, and I didn't want anyone in my grade seeing that, especially in a picture on social media. But I think it's just like my friends, I saw them spending so much time editing it, and just like the constant comparison. And even in I guess influencers Instagrams, like people will catch them, or like the Kardashians or anyone, and they'll always catch them editing. I just think it's just like, I don't understand why to an extent that they have to edit, because they already are like showing this unrealistic standard, but they just keep reinforcing it. I've never done it, but it's I know it's a huge part of it.
But I also think like it's such a fine line between like, there's still that judgment either way. Like if you're heavily editing your photos, people are gonna be like, that's not real, and scrutinize it that way. But then if you're not editing your photos and you don't have like the perfect body or the perfect skin, or like you're not wearing I don't know what it is, but then people will scrutinize that too. So really, like, it's kind of hard to win, because
I think it just sort of says something. I think it just says something about us, like humans as a whole. The fact that we like look at something like that, whether or not it's edited, but like we'll see a picture of someone, and like the immediate thought or response is typically negative. Like think about how often we, you know, like as you were saying about your friend, how she would like zoomed in, was like, oh my god, that's fake, like there's no way that's real, instead of going like, damn, like she looks really good.
That's
like,
what I would do.
Good for her.
She looks good.
Like we just don't do that as
I
much.
know.
And I just think that I feel like part of it, the reason why I think like social media has such a big impact is I think that social media just like obviously, as Francesca, as you were saying before, like especially people who do have anxiety, like, you know, we will like people will, you know, judge or like jump to judge or like see someone and like immediately have, you know, some sort of thought about them. But I really feel like social media has made it to where like a lot of those thoughts and judgments are immediately negative, because it's sort of, I feel like in a sense social media is like so competition based and it like pits us against each other, just the whole way it's set up and how it's like based on numbers, like how many friends or followers or like what your score is or how many likes you get or how many retweets it is. It's just like all based at like a point based competition is just the way that I see it, and I think that's why we like it's made us like go to the point where like our immediate judgments are more often negative than I think they are positive. I think that if it weren't as based in points, sure, you might like, you know, some people, you know, are just maybe more negative than others and would see something and just automatically have those feelings of jealousy or something. But I just think that it's made us more negative as a whole.
Right.
And I think that just,
to judge.
yeah. Well, it's not that it's, I wouldn't say necessarily, I mean, I think that's kind of true, but it's not so much about like us being more inclined to judge, but those judgments being more negative.
Right.
Because I think the whole thing is rooted in like a point system where it's like just like one big competition.
It is. Francesca, did you say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say with that too, like it's an even more impossible kind of point system or standard because it's never good enough, right? Like you never have, like maybe you have the most likes out of like your particular social circle, but like there's influencers that have more likes than you. There's like celebrities that have more. So like you're never getting enough of like like as much validation as like those points are giving you. It's never enough, and so it's just like contributes to that like inadequate feeling, I guess.
Right, like you're unsatisfied all the time with some part of your profile.
You know what else I think is really interesting too, just because I've like heard it said throughout this podcast, is the way like the reason why we use the word influencer and like why they're called influencers. Because I the way I see it is like they don't actually really have a job, but like literally what they do is like influence the way we think about ourselves and the way we think about other people and like the things that, you know, we might buy or we might be interested, because that's like all they really do is promote things and promote themselves. And
because of like this, you know, mindset that we have now because of that, like that's why it is a job, because they can sell things that way. And then you're gonna be like, oh, I want this skincare product, I want this blow dry, I don't know what it is, I want this energy drink, whatever, because this person has it, and then I can be more like them, and then maybe I will feel better about myself.
no, but that is very true, but I think that the reason, because like they're not called promoters, you know, like sure, that is probably where they make a good chunk of their money, and I mean that's a good reason, like a good portion of why they do it is because, you know, they use their social media status to be able to sell items for these companies, and they get money for that or whatever. But I think like they're called influencers because they not only influence like the things that we, you know, the items or things that we may care about or may like or may want to buy now because of their promotion, but they influence the way that they think. Like if you, or the way that we think, you think about a lot of these people, they, as we've sort of said, like they kind of go above and beyond these standards that we've now set, and they kind of like skew the standards that we now have for each other because of, you know, the things that they are in their pictures or the way that they look. And it really sort of like impacts the way that we think about the way we judge other people and the way that we think about ourselves. Because a lot of these people are like, okay, they're posing with like a really nice car, or they're, you know, there's a bunch of like attractive women. Like it just like it goes beyond just like the way that they promote things, but also the way that they literally influence like how we think about ourselves.
Right, because they get us to aspire to be like them, and then whatever they use or whatever they show that they use, it influences their followers to do the same. So like a lot of influencers, they'll make these brands, but then the way that they're successful isn't even because people want the things or they're gonna use them or they find them to be good in some way. It's just like they want to support them and they just want to use what they're using. It's not even like quality based. It's just like aspiring to meet what they consider the standard to be at, and then you want to meet that standard, I think.
Yeah,
and that's how they're influencing.
I think that also sort of extends to another interesting topic, which is kind of like how some of these people like achieve their status. Because it's really strange. It's really weird, and like I think some of these like influencers, like some of the things that they really like gained traction and like, you know, like a following for and because I don't know, I just think it's a bit weird. Like it's kind of strange, and it's like I feel like we should almost like take a look at ourselves and like, okay, well, we are the people like giving these people this following and like this level of status, and it's like, you know, why are we doing this?
Yeah, right. Like what do they actually have to offer us?
Because I don't mean to like call out like all influencers or and it's like a broad sort of like general word at this point,
right?
Because I feel like that's kind of a word you could use to describe just so many people in pop culture at this point. Just because it's like people have gained popularity and status for just the strangest things that it's like we don't even really have a word for it. So like influencer is the word, because of the reasons like why these people are gaining their level of status. Like
I think it's also just I would never want to be in their position, to be honest. I think it's so exhausting. How exhausting must it be to be an influencer? Like,
well, just to constantly be like thinking about yourself and like thinking about, you know, the way that people are going to view you.
Right.
Because it's like, think about it. This is something that we've already, you know, we're talking about that we've dealt with, and we're saying, you know, like how it's, you know, from our position, it's affected our mental health. But like for some of these people, like this is their life. Like this is
and
why.
More than their life too, like this is their livelihood. And so I think it's even like harder for people. Like for me, when it got too intense, I was like, I have to quit this. And I think for them, it's like, think about how much more pressure there is involved and how much harder it must be to even like take a break for a moment, because you're going to lose that status and those followers and like what is like, this is their job at this point. And so it's like you have the threat of losing your job.
Yeah, and then like, some influencers didn't even want that to be their job. It kind of just became their job. And then they have this status that now they have this expectation to be doing something more with it. Like, oh, you have these followers, what are you saying to them? Like, what are you saying? Are you impactful in some way? Whether that's promoting like sustainability or some political thing, or they want something like to be on their side, like promoting something good, like, why aren't you talking about this or these issues going on in this world? Like, you should be spreading more awareness with your like followers and then now they have this like job and this expectation that they set, and it's like they don't know, they didn't ask for that, but now they have to do it.
And I think that's also like what we were talking about earlier about how it's like never enough. Like, it could just be someone who's like, I just wanted to show like my makeup videos, you know, and like suddenly I have like this entire audience that like, one, I have to like set an example for in my own life, but then I have to like put out this message or of whatever.
This is off topic, but it was kind of recent with Coachella and everything. It's very popular for the influencers to like go all out with what they wear so that they can post their outfits, and then everyone can judge like what every influencer wears, and they can kind of like rate them on their outfits on a scale. And this is what like happens after Coachella. And then it was just funny because this year the like actual like A-listers, celebrities, like they don't really wear anything that flashy because they're not trying to really impress anyone, like they're already A-list celebrities. But people were saying that it was funny because the influencers were like trying too hard, and then the A-listers just showed up in like jeans and a t-shirt and called it a day. And it was just like people were saying like the influencers are like begging to like be as cool, but then the actual cool people show up and they're not like in anything special. And I think that's just funny because the influencers are like, but this is our job. Like, our job is to attract. Our job is to gain attention. Like, that we have to show out and like post in these outfits to get a certain amount of likes and to get people talking, and like they'll wear extravagant things to get that attention. And then these like other celebrities just show up in like whatever they want because they don't actually like care that much. That's not really their job.
Also,
but
like whether they care or not, like they don't need to, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah, that's what I was about to say.
And like we're still gonna like buy someone's music or like listen to someone's, or like their art makes them famous, right? So they don't have to. They can have like an outfit flop or whatever, and no one cares. They're still gonna be successful. Like influencers, like you said, it's based on the attention they're getting, so they have to try hard. Like they don't really have another option.
Right, like it defines them.
If you think about what you just said too, like they're A-listers, so literally like that means like they have reached sort of like the pinnacle of like what these people are trying to achieve, like the influencers are trying to achieve. And like in their, you know, in the eyes of like the A-listers, like they, you know, what more do they need to do? And also like why, you know, for them attract any sort of unnecessary attention when they're already like the most famous people in the world. You know, like why bring, especially where, you know, it could honestly like be potentially dangerous to them. Is like why bring any more attention? Whereas like these other influencers, like their goal is to be where those people already are.
Yeah.
So it's like they're, as we said, like this is their life. Like their livelihood depends on them essentially like trying to reach that peak.
And I guess why I brought that up is just because like it's so much time and thought and anxiety that they must feel.
Yeah.
Like just preparing for these events. It's just because.
And at that point, I think this brings it like almost all the way back to like where we started. You're not even going to Coachella to go to Coachella. Like at that point, because they're putting, I mean, if you think about all the effort and thought that they put into like what they're gonna wear to Coachella and where they're gonna pose for their pictures and like how like everything's gonna go, it's like at this point, are they even going to see the artists who are playing? Like, are they really enjoying the music that's being played? Are they really like having a great time?
No, they're probably thinking of going to the front to like get a good picture near the person.
It's just like the things that go into like, you know, like the thought process that goes into these things and the way it impacts like how we just experience life.
Right.
Is so crazy.
Right. And now I was just gonna, I kind of forgot about this, but when you were talking about the editing on TikTok, there's so many filters now that are put makeup on you, and like there's the beauty filter, and then it like smooths out your skin and all of that. But now some of the filters are so real looking and like natural looking that you take it off and you're just like, oh, like I can achieve that. Like I can do that technically. Like it doesn't look that hard. And then you become like trying to do it on a day-to-day basis. So it's not even you editing a picture now. It's the edited picture, you're becoming the edited picture. You know what I mean?
Then,
it's like,
yeah, and then you like lose any appreciation for just like who you are naturally,
right.
Because like you're trying to achieve a standard that's like not really real, but
yeah.
then you don't feel like who you are by yourself is good enough.
Exactly, and it's really, I don't like to do those filters on me. I'll do it once just to see how it looks, but then I'll be like, oh, like that, I look a lot better with it. And then I'll just like, obviously you get used to looking at yourself normally, but then the filter is just, I just think they're so damaging because then you're kind of like looking at yourself through that filter. And then
I definitely, I don't really make TikToks ever, but I remember like with Snapchat, like kind of like you can like take a picture and like how it looks, and then you put a filter on it, and then you take the filter off, and you're like, oh, now I look terrible. You know, it's like the same kind of thing.
It's like you looked fine, like you think you looked fine.
You liked this photo of yourself actually.
Right, it's like, oh, you looked fine, and then you put the filter on and off, and now you don't think you look fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It kind of just changes the way your brain like perceives your own beauty.
And you can think that that's such a minor thing, but like subconsciously, like, and when it happens so much, like that takes a toll.
Yeah. I remember I was with my friend and I met someone and the girl was wearing like makeup that looked like one of the filters on TikTok. And my friend was like, oh my God, your makeup looks exactly like this filter. And she was like, really? Like, thank you. And then you'll see like other people and they'll only use the filter on TikTok and then they'll show up in person and look nothing like what they do. And there's just this huge, like, I guess, contrast or like of what people look like now or how people are perceived now.
Well, I think it's also like gone, I mean, there's a whole show and term about it, but like it's gone to the point where like I feel like social media has just sort of like made us like almost so uncomfortable in our own skin that like we have to like look a certain way or change the way we look to like match up to standards. Like it's literally like catfishing.
Yeah.
It's a whole term for like basically like the idea that like one couldn't be like or wouldn't be comfortable enough in their own skin to like show who they are. And I think that like, you know, like that's definitely like a real thing and a real feeling, and I'm not saying that like, I'm not trying to like invalidate that feeling at all, but I'm saying that I feel like social media only brings that out anymore because it's just raised sort of the standard of how we're supposed to look, or like how, you know, certain people should look. And so it's like, it's just kind of like raised the bar for like where, you know, like you may feel uncomfortable.
And then like talking about, I mean, this is true like for like physical beauty standards too, but well, mostly, but I think for anything, like it also changes, like there's no, like we don't accept like variety and diversity anymore, I think. Like you have to, like if everyone's trying to achieve the same standard and the same look and like what's considered like social media, you know, appropriate, like we all start to like wanna like look the same way and do the same makeup looks and wear the same things and like act the same way, and like I think there's no room for people to like do their makeup differently or like wear their own kind of style, or like it kind of removes any like
originality.
Individuality, anything. It's like we're all trying to be the same thing.
Yeah, it's just like a copy and paste.
Totally.
Anyways,
All
what
right.
time is it?
It is 3:07, so
We're playing.
Did you have anything else you wanted to ask, Max?
Or do you want to conclude it?
I had a few questions, but I didn't like any of the questions and I didn't want to use them because they were just kind of like too broad and I didn't really like know a way to word them to where like it would be. And I feel like we ultimately answered like a lot of these questions just like in our own ways, which I liked it a lot better this way. I like didn't want it because I don't really like when like you have a podcast and they have like you bring on guests and then they just like ask them questions because then it feels like an interview and not like, you know, them just having a conversation.
Wait, I actually have a question for Francesca. Like, how do you think your life is experienced differently now that you've deleted Instagram? Like, do you think you're more present?
Yeah, I would say it's a lot that like, it was something I had to do at a certain point. Like and I also think in general, my life has just gotten better. Like, I enjoy my life here now. I enjoy my friends here now. Like, I've created my own social circle. But at first, when I felt really alone at school and like I didn't have that, spending all my time seeing what my friends who didn't live here, what they were doing, like, was not healthy for me. And was also not helping me, like, I wasn't having those feelings outside of seeing their social media. Like, I chose this school for a reason. All of those reasons were still true. Like, I was sort of making my friends, but like nothing was good enough for me because I was like, I could be having a better time if I were there. And I also think now, like, when I go do things, I'm not really, it's kind of the thing we were talking about of how, like, I don't go anywhere to take a picture, I just go to go. And, like, live my life and have a great time. And, like, I don't really care, like, what I look, I mean, I care what I look like, but I mean, like, if I'm, like, out at a bar and, like, my makeup's getting messed up or something, like, I don't give a shit because I'm not posting myself. I'm just, like, there to have a good time.
Yeah.
And I also think I would never have given myself like the freedom and sort of the grace to like branch out and do things that I necessarily like, I don't know, like I don't know if I would have ever thought that my life here was good enough or cool enough or like been totally happy if I was constantly in my head somewhere else and I was so connected to those friends from home, and now I realize, like, I love my friends from home, but, like, I have a whole life here that I wasn't living.
I feel like once you step away from Instagram and posting, I feel like you find more happiness in just being comfortable with what you have, like, or what you do on a regular basis, because I guess in the beginning of the year, I cared a lot more than I do now. And I think that's because now I've found my place and I have my friends and I know who they are. And I have this sense of comfortability in my life that I don't need to be proving it or showing it off or gaining attention or like wanting people to like me from an outside perspective, because I'm happy the way my life is now. I don't really care to like change it. So
I think once you get there, like it's okay to like have it and enjoy it. I think you just have to like know kind of what your triggers are and when like you see yourself, you know, starting to form habits that are unhealthy, just like maybe step away for a moment. Like now I haven't had Instagram for a couple of years, and we just got a cat, my roommates and I, and we have an Instagram for our cat, and so I have the app on my phone now, and like I don't find myself doing the same things I used to do. Like I follow my old friends with our cat account.
Right, it's just like you start to care less.
Hours like looking at what they're doing, you know what I mean? So I think like I needed to give myself that distance to become happy and settled in my life here before I could do that.
Right, once you find that like settled place, you just care less about, I guess, showing it off because you find comfortability and you find satisfaction in what you have. You don't really need anything more.
Totally. And I also feel like for me, I found that social media is a lot healthier for me when I said this earlier, but consuming it in a way that's like more entertainment based than me posting myself. Not because like I'm necessarily insecure about myself, but when I post, those feelings come up and they wouldn't naturally come up. So it's like, I know it's better for me to just like, I can watch TikToks of like people I think are funny and that's not damaging, but if I were constantly posting myself on TikTok, I think I would really criticize myself a lot. And so I think it's just, you have to learn like what works for you and what doesn't.
Right, like establish your own boundaries.
Totally.
I think you summed it up really well.
But I recommend it.
Yeah.
When you said like, I don't remember, I don't remember the exact words, but you were saying something about how like, you know, when you finally deleted Instagram and you, like, it made you realize that there was a whole life that you had, you know, where you were, that you just weren't living because you were so busy like living, you know, a life online and like, you know, like living
about what I didn't have, like rather than what I do have, you know, like I was living in a mindset of like, I could have this rather than, okay, well I don't have that, but I do have this, so let's enjoy what I do have. Yeah. And that was really game changing for me.
Yeah, and doing things because you want to do it, not for the photo.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yup. Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been a real honor and a pledge.
Goodbye, viewers. Thank you for watching my video.